he reads her dissertation. Hey y'all, welcome back to another video. It is actually Boxing Day when I'm recording this because I like to get my New Year's resolutions started about a week early, like Christmas, big holiday, and then slowly start to work my way up towards like New Year's resolutions starting that like week before. So I'll start trying to do those habits, build those in. So this is one of them, which was doing more videos. And also this kind of goes with like one of the other New Year's resolutions of reading more books. This time around, I'm going to be talking about the 50 books that I read in 2025, which I know is crazy. It's the most I've ever read. I do acknowledge a good chunk of them were like audiobooks, which I know some people think is cheating, and then also a good chunk of it was while I was waiting for my immigration paperwork to like go through, so I was not doing any sort of work, so I had more free time on my hands. With all that being said, yes, I was able to get through a lot more books than I usually do, but it was kind of fun, and like it allowed me to like actually find joy again in reading because I had not in a long time. I'm going to break it up by months, and you can see where some of them are a lot, some of them are a little bit. Let's start with February. So in February, I actually listened to 2 audiobooks. One was while I was like packing and clearing out my apartment, and that was The Shift by Tinx. I give that like a 3.5 out of 5 star. It was kind of just like a self-help book, which like maybe is a little cheesy, but like I periodically like to listen to self-help books to kind of get in the right mindset. And especially right at that point in time, I was in the process of moving and I was about to like really have a big life change. So I thought reading about it and kind of like getting myself into a more hyped mindset would be good. The other one that I read in February, this was one that I listened to while I was driving, especially the infamous like drive in West Texas late at night, or I was just like really exhausted and gripping the wheel, was Buy What You Love Without Going Broke by Jen and Jill. I always forget their last names because I listened to the Frugal Friends podcast. That's really how I ended up finding out about this book. It was a lovely book. I give it like a 4 out of 5 stars. And it was stuff that I pretty much knew a good chunk of it already because I'd listened to the podcast. There wasn't anything like crazy new, but it's always kind of good to remind myself on some of these financial things. Also, all of this I listened to either via Libby, unless I'll say otherwise, or I got the books from the library. I was using my libraries a lot. The next book that I read, and this is the only one I listened to in the month of May, was Poemhood, which is an anthology. You can see it here. In this case, I gave it also a 4 out of 5 stars. I think the one critique I have with that like audiobook is that maybe they should have added a few more like seconds in between each poem. I liked the idea of listening to audiobook because like poetry is really good when listened to. Like that's a whole like portion of reading poems. But I think it just needed like a few more seconds to kind of like sit with the poems for a bit and then go on to the next one. Or maybe doing it as like an immersive reading. Like if it was an immersive reading, I think that would have also been really useful. Now we're moving into June. This first book that I listened to was They Came for the Schools by Hixenbough. I think that's the correct pronunciation of his last name. This one also was a 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really liked it. It maybe could have just been a little bit better in terms of like some of the pacing, I guess. This is nonfiction and it is talking about really how conservatives are using school boards to like push their agendas. And it's doing a lot more harm than good, especially for students who are BIPOC or queer. Like it's really harmful. And there was a principal of one of the schools in Silver Lake, Texas, that pissed me off so much because all he was doing was protecting students that were spreading hate. Like that's all he was doing. And he's no longer a principal at that school. It also made me really interested in school boards generally, especially because I come from a pretty conservative section of Southern California. The first like physical book that I read this year was Tortilla Flats by John Steinbeck. This was a 3 out of 5 stars, and this is kind of like what if King Arthur's court was with a bunch of drunks in like Monterey, or like right next to Monterey. There were some things that were like kind of offensive in terms of like the word Jew was used a lot as like a slur in this book. So that was really uncomfortable. I think it's interesting to read if you've only read like maybe one or two other Steinbecks, because this is very different than a lot of his work. Also in the month of June, I read the physical book Loathe to Love You by Hazelwood. It is a like 3 novellas together following 3 friends who are like all friends in graduate school and how they find love afterwards. And oh my gosh, in the second book in there, the male love interest, he reads her dissertation. Like that was the sweetest like thing of love I have ever read in my life, is he meets her once and then reads her dissertation. Like, oh, that's so cute. Also in the month of June, I listened to How to Be Antiracist by Ibram X Kendi. That was a 4.5 stars. I had been meaning to listen to like How to Be Antiracist since like 2020, and I finally did. And then the last one I listened to in the month of June was Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. I put the hold on it for a while, but I hadn't gotten it until that point. And that one also was a 4.5 stars. I pretty much read anything that John Green publishes since I've been watching Vlogbrothers for many, many years. And this one was kind of like interesting to read and also gave me more books that I want to listen to. And you'll see a book that he references in Everything is Tuberculosis later on in my reading wrap up. I would say this was another one, especially if you're interested in like how global health is really an indicator for like poverty, actually. Okay. Now we are moving on to the month of July, which I read a lot of books in the month of July. The first book I ended up reading was called The Library Book, which I did get from the library, like it was an audiobook, and this is by Susan Orlean, and I gave it like a 3.75 stars. And this is a book about a fire that happened at the LA library, like the central Los Angeles library, and all of the work that is done by the Los Angeles library, which is a crazy amount. But then also through this context of a fire that occurred in 1985 or 86. It happened actually the same week as Chernobyl, so it definitely did not get nearly as much like PR. But I thought it was really interesting to learn all the work that the library does, and I ended up going to the like LA library with one of my really good friends later on, and we did a whole tour, and I knew some of the stuff from like reading the book. And also to try to save some of the books, the Boeing site in Huntington Beach actually like helped. They had all this water damage to the books, and they'd been put in a freezer for an extended period of time, and they had used the vacuum at the Huntington Beach site to like extract it all. And I remember when I interned at that Boeing facility when I was like 17 in high school, my mentor mentioned actually helping with this. Like him and his wife had to come in on like the weekend and were bringing books into this massive vacuum chamber. I was a little annoyed that they didn't actually say like the location. They were just like a McDonnell Douglas site, because at the time it was McDonnell Douglas. And I'm like, you say all of these other city names, but you didn't mention that. So yeah, that was kind of exciting. That I'm like, I knew some of this stuff. I recognized it from years and years and years ago. Then the next one I listened to was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsing. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. It worked better as an audiobook. I tried to read this when I was 17 and in high school, because this was actually required reading for my theory of knowledge class like over the summer. And I had felt really discouraged. I had read it for like 2 hours on a plane ride between like Southern California and Denver. And I only got about like 50 pages in, and it hurt a lot. And I was like, oh, I never got further on it. I think that some of it is much better to read as like once you've gotten older, once you've gotten through college especially. It's a book that's much more for like older readers in terms of like you just need to be a bit more mature. You need to have more life experiences before actually reading it. I do not think it was a great option for like a 17-year-old to have these questions about like academia. I was reading it and I was like, oh yeah, I can definitely relate to XYZ. Also, it's a little weird because a lot of it takes place in Montana, which I've not been to Montana, but most of my family's from Montana. Then I read The Project by David A. Graham. This is kind of a very short audiobook that talks about Project 2025. And oh my gosh, does that feel so dystopian, because we are currently living it. And again, I gave it like a 4 out of 5 stars. It was pretty good. The next book, and this was actually a physical book that I read, was We Are Not From Here by Jenny Torres Sanchez. And I give this like a 4.5 stars. This is a YA book talking about children coming from Guatemala as they are like escaping and going up to the United States. They were entering like as undocumented people, and like all of the trials and tribulations that go with it. And it was just so beautifully written, and it was such a good book and very, very poignant for right now. I highly recommend it. It tugged such a heartstrings. It was a hard read at points, but I really, really loved it. I read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It was the audiobook and she narrates it. Oh my goodness, is it just beautifully written, and just having her do the audiobooks, you just like, you get the right inflections and you're just, it's so heartbreaking, but it's so beautiful. And I'm also looking at you, Huntington Beach Library. Why the heck do you not have The Bluest Eye in your catalog? Did you remove it because was somebody upset because it made them uncomfortable? This book is something you need to read, especially when you take into account things like in both How to Be Antiracist and another book I'll talk about later. There is the baby doll experiment that is very well known. And this is a perfect example, like The Bluest Eye, a literary example of this very well-known like experiment where children really hate like the black dolls, like, and even if the doll looks like the child, they start to like have this internal hatred toward themselves. I give that like a 5-star. It was so good. And I have more Toni Morrison books that I need to read. And then actually the other book that mentions this, like the doll experiment, is How Fascism Works. Oh no, wait, that's later on. Different book. How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley. So this one was 4.25. Jason Stanley is a professor of like political science. How Fascism Works, it was again a very eerie with the current state of the United States. I read The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I had been curious about it because it's this like multiple demons writing to each other, or really Screwtape, who is one of these like head demons, is writing to his nephew, who is like his first time as being a personal demon. And at points it sounds like the nephew is kind to change is C.S. Lewis really, and some of his discussion on like religious thought. And there was a really interesting conversation about gluttony in this book that talks about like how gluttony used to be like this overindulgence, and now it's just things being just right, and that really stuck with me. And I say that's like a 3.25 star read. It's quite good. I kind of want to read it again to take more in. I liked the fact also that the chapters were maybe 4 to 5 pages long. It also kind of got winded at points, that's why it's kind of a little bit lower. This is the one that actually at the other talks about the baby doll experiments, and that is The Science of Racism by Keon West. This is a 4 out of 5 star. So I did really enjoy this. I also found it very interesting that he uses Flatland at one point in the book. Flatland is a book that I referenced in my dissertation because of like high entropy alloys being kind of this like extra dimensions that we don't really see in 3D. So I thought that was a very interesting crossover. And that was, like I said, 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I listened to, and this because also this is a very short book, it was only about 2 hours, so I was just kind of listened to it in one sitting, and that was Surface Berries by Robin Wall Kimmerman. That was a 3.5 stars, and it's just kind of a fun book about like how everything's interconnected and like everybody should be helping each other. Even like I know there's like, well, somebody may take like more than they need, and it's like there's always going to be 1 or 2 people, but that should not discourage you from actually like helping and doing work, caring for other people, and having like those like free little libraries or like pantries. Like there is so much more good that can come out of it than hiding away and hoarding things. Also, I listened to House Arrest by K.A. Holt. So for those who watch like Meet Me in the Media Center on TikTok, she mentioned this book. It's a novel in verse, and that one is a 4 out of 5 stars. It's about this kid who he's on house arrest for like stealing a credit card to buy medication for his younger brother who has like a medical condition. It's the 2 brothers and the mother and like the caretaker for the brother who has a trach, and the brother is trying to do everything he can to save his younger brother. It's really good. And then we're going back to some of the financial stuff where we've got Deeper Than Money by Claire Elsie, which is a 4.25 stars. This one was a really good one for like, again, it's in that similar vein of Buy What You Love Without Going Broke, but a little bit more on some of the financial stuff, especially for somebody who's in their like mid-20s. I think this was a good one for me to listen to, and I really enjoyed it. There was nothing crazy that I didn't already know, but it was a good like kind of reset reminder as I was about to go into a new phase of life. You've also got California Against the Sea by Rosanna Xia. I hope I pronounced her last name correctly. This was a 3.25 star out of 5. This one was kind of interesting to read more about the California coastline and things like the California Coastal Commission. I knew about it, like the fact is like you can't build stuff west of PCH anymore, but also being like, oh yeah, Balboa Island is like all just like dredged up sand, and like how the California coastline is moving and how are we like approaching treating that. And each area, it's on a case-by-case basis, so that like makes sense. But yeah, it was really interesting to read, especially because like of how it was not particularly liked by a lot of people early on, and some people still don't like it, but I think it's kind of an interesting one. I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and this was a 3.75 out of 5. I was reading this for a book club that I was part of. This was the first V.E. Schwab. I remember being kind of interested in her like years ago when I used to watch a lot more BookTube. And this one, I liked the book. I did not particularly care for the audiobook because I started doing that as like also a combination like immersion reading. But I did not like the voice that the narrator did for one of the characters. It was very odd. It was like a weird German thing. But overall, I thought the book was really good. And at some point, I do need to sit down and actually read the like rest of the books in that series. I have like another one on hold, or was on hold, but I never got around to reading it. So at some point I do plan on finishing the Darker Shade of Magic series, because I'm like, I can see a lot of things being interspersed throughout it, the foreshadowing for the next couple of books. And then lastly, in the month of July, I read The Loneliness Files by Athena Dixon. This is a series of essay memoirs, and I give this like a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really fun, and now like Athena Dixon and I are mutuals on TikTok, which is kind of cool, because like it was just like a good book to kind of address being like highly educated and lonely during the pandemic. Now, as we get into August, the first book that I read was Under Lock and Key by Lana Ferguson. This one I give like a 3.75 out of 5. I do love Lana Ferguson, and you will see her name show up a lot more. I'd read Fake Mate back in 2024, and I really liked it. And when Under Lock and Key came out, initially I started listening to the audiobook, but I just was not in a good spot. But when I was able to get the physical book at the library, I was like, you know what, let's read it. And I had fun. It's a very silly book, but it's fun. It is kind of, in my opinion, like my least favorite of the books that I've read of hers so far. Also kind of in the romance genre, I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, which I gave a 3.75 out of 5. I think it was fun, and there were some really interesting conversations with it. It didn't hit as much, in my opinion, on something. I think the characters are like really interesting, especially Rue. I think she's a very interesting character. Then I initially planned on trying to do a like Christmas in July reading, but it ended up being in August, and that was The Christmas Countdown by Holly Cassidy, which is 3.25. It was okay, like nothing great. I could definitely see it being kind of a good like Hallmark movie. It does not make me want to read more of her like Christmas books. I then listened to The Siren's Call by Chris Hayes. This was a 4.25 out of 5. Oh my gosh, this one talks about like attention and like the like everybody trying to get our attention in terms of media. And especially like how rich people, like you can have all of this wealth in the world, but that doesn't equate to like the attention. So that's things like Trump was always wanting attention. Elon Musk came out before some of the like Becca Bloom or other like major influencers. I was like, yeah, I can definitely see that. You can have all the money in the world, but that does not mean that you have all the attention in the world. So you have to do crazy stuff to do that. Yeah, that was a good one. Also by Jason Stanley. I read his most recent book, Erasing History, and this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars because like this is a much more recent one. It also discusses a lot of what we're seeing in the United States as well as in India, Russia, and Hungary, and kind of as they're barreling towards this almost like nationalism, fascist kind of movement, and also really approaching Russia and Ukraine, because like Russia is really trying to say like, oh, Ukraine is just like a add-on of Russia. There's no difference, which is kind of interesting. I then read Likeable Badass by Alison Fraggle. She is a PhD in occupational psychology, and this was also a 4.25 out of 5. I do kind of want to reread this book again because she gives different assignments to go through and do. I want to read it again to see, okay, I've kept up with a couple of these things. Let's do some more. This is one that I think I may even want the physical copy just so I can keep going back to some of those exercises. For that book club that I was in for, that we read The Darker Shade of Magic, I also read The Women by Kristen Hanna, which I was like, okay, It was fine. I gave it like a 3.5 stars because like a lot of the writing was beautiful, but I think they should have focused on some of the other characters. Like one of the main character's friends, much preferred her. Also, there was some incorrect stuff with the Naval Academy, honestly, which I'm like, you did all this other research, but you couldn't get the like commissioning correct. And like some of these other timeline things and I was just like, eesh. Then I ended up reading Leave Only Footprints by Connor Knighton. This was a 3.75. This was a book all about the different national parks, which was really cool and interesting. I've only been to, I don't think I've actually been to any of like the official national parks. I'd wanted to go to Yosemite, but that just didn't work out this summer. So that was a good one. And then I also read The Nanny by Lana Ferguson, and this was like a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it so much. I was giggling so much. It was so good. In September, I slowed down a little bit more on the reading too. So the first book I finished was Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder. This is a 4.75. This is all about Paul Farmer, who was one of the founders of Partners in Health. So this is where we get some of the early discussions about tuberculosis, like because John Green knew Paul Farmer. Paul Farmer sadly passed away a couple of years ago due to like really a family health condition of like very sudden heart attacks. And this man worked himself to the bone because he always was like, there's one more person to help, there's one more person to like save or try to save. And I just thought it was like so inspiring. And he's like, it's the slow defeat is kind of how he describes it. And I think that's very true, because they are trying to just slowly even out the playing field. And I think because people always criticize like John Green for only being focused on tuberculosis, and it's like tuberculosis is a really easy like kind of point to like point at to like say, okay, if there's still a lot of tuberculosis, especially this drug-free tuberculosis, there's a lot more involving poverty and like access to medication, because like Paul Farmer did his like PhD proving that like, hey, if you're giving people like a couple extra bucks, they actually are much more likely to follow through on their like medication regimen, or like allowing them to have like childcare while they're going to the doctor. It's not patient non-compliance, it's them not being able, like having the resources, like overall resources. And so that's, I think this is a book that people really should read, even though it's like on the older side. It is a really good book. Also, for a different book club that I was in where we were supposed to talk about chocolate, I read Stuff Matters by Mark Modawick, which was a 4.25. This was all about material science, and I really enjoyed it. There was a chapter about chocolate, which is why I read it for the book club, but also I like to see how people explain material science to people who are like just a layperson. And I got some really fun examples, so I highly recommend it. I did recommend this actually to my former PI to be like, hey, check this out. I think this would be a good one for us to kind of have conversations to get people interested in material science. Then I read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This was a 4.5 out of 5. I think in some ways I need to have like her a little bit more step back from academia books, because the ones that are too close in academia, I'm like, no, I'm in academia right now. This is a little too real for home. Then I read The Lodge by Kayla Olson. It was a 3 out of 5 stars. I was just playing around with my like Kindle because I had just gotten it, and so I got a book that was kind of Christmassy themed because I tried to read it a while back, but that like timing had not worked out. So yeah, it was okay. Nothing to write home about. It was very bubblegummy. Then I also read Fan Service by Rosie Dawn, 2.5 out of 5. It was like a weird, almost supernatural, but like werewolves. And I was like, you're not doing werewolves correctly, in my opinion. And I was just kind of like, meh, could have been a lot better. There was like a lot of things that could have been done more. Then I read Mixed Signals by B.K. Morrison. This was a 4 out of 5 stars. I'd actually started this last year because I bought the audiobook on Black Friday or Small Business Saturday on Libro FM, when I also got In the Weeds, because I have liked B.K. Morrison, but I never finished it, so I decided to finish it finally, and I did really enjoy it. I thought they were a very cute couple, especially because we kept on seeing the buildup of Lana and Carlos. And I think because we'd had this buildup for quite some time, it was a good payoff. And then also I finished Custodians of Wonder. This was a 3.75 stars by Elliot Stein, which I found fun because it went over all of these different forms of like art and crafts and jobs that we're losing. And the big thing is like many of the children do not want to follow in their parents' footsteps, and that's reasonable because you cannot make these like kind of livings off of it. Highly recommend that too. In the month of October, I slowed down even more in my reading a bit. So I did read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmer. So do you remember I read Surface Berry, and then I've read her more famous book, and that was 4.25 stars. She does do the audiobooks for both of them, and it's just really beautiful. And also Robin Kimmer has lived off and on in central Kentucky. So in some things it was kind of interesting to be able to recognize places. Like she talks about going to Jessamine County, which is right next to Fayette County. It was just really interesting to have kind of the conversation of both like more of the traditional Western academic botany sciences as well as the indigenous culture. And that was kind of cool. Then to finish off the like Love Like Farm series, I finished Business Casual by B.K. Morrison. This was a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, this was fun. It was lighthearted. I then read Dandelion Wines by Ray Bradbury. This was a 2.75 out of 5. It was just a lot of these little vignettes, and there was one section that was beautiful. Oh my goodness, where there's just like these two people that there was this older woman who like always used an old photo of herself in the newspaper or newsletter for something that she supports. And then one of the news reporters goes to like talk and meet with her, and they just spend like the entire summer together. And she mentions, oh, I thought you were so similar to this one person who had been like a previous lover. And she makes a comment of like, okay, because she's like, oh, I know my time is coming. Don't like wait too long or our like paths won't cross again. And it's really similar, or not really similar, but it reminded me of this movie that has Christopher Reeves in it. It's this one. I thought it was pretty good. Actually not pretty good. I've read the synopsis of it, but it was like something similar, and that one was just like heartbreaking. And the reason I'd read the Ray Bradbury was because like when I was reading the library book, Susan Orleans mentions Ray Bradbury because he actually wrote a lot of his books at the like Los Angeles library, and I've already read Fahrenheit 451, so I decided to read something else. Also in the month of October, I read A Court of Sugar and Spice by Rebecca F. Kennedy. You can see my review from Vlogmas up there. This was like a 3 out of 5 stars. And then afterwards, I almost immediately read Jack Frost, also by Rebecca F. Kennedy, and this was also 3 out of 5 stars. That one, I was like, it got weird, got crazy weird. I'm like, don't need this. Kind of very different approach. I ended up reading Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. This was a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was one that like Matthew Desmond has also written Evicted, and is talking about how the US is really bad about taking care of the poor, and California is actually one of the worst too. Like that one did not surprise me actually. California is seen as very liberal, but they also have a lot of policies that are not great. And then I read Nutcracker with Benefits by Liz Aldrin. It's like a 2.5 out of 5. It is a novella that I was like, it was interesting, it was weird. The couple has been like kind of hooking up for almost 10 years now, and he's trying to keep her like, or not keep her, but have like a relationship. It's a whole thing. And
more opinions coming in a later video.
Now on to November. In this case, I also read another Lana Ferguson. This one was called Game Changer. This was the hockey romance that she wrote. This was a 4.25. I could not stop reading it. I loved it so much. I'm really, really excited that she announced that there was going to be like a sequel coming out this summer. I'm like, I kind of called it. I was like, I wonder. And then I looked on her like Instagram, and then she just announced. I'm like, oh, that's fun. And then I read Little Book of Common Sense in Investing by Bogle. This was a 3.25. Again, it was not much that I didn't know, but it was kind of interesting to hear it from somebody who literally invented like Vanguard and a lot of the like index fund stuff. I then read Novel Christmas by Charity Shane. You can see my review, and that was a 3.5. I then, because of the book club, even though I'm not there, I did read Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Acosta. That was a 2.75 out of 5. I was like, actually my biggest critique is you're trying to make this like some sort of allegory for racism, but you're like being really surface level about it all. Like you could have some really deep conversations about it, but you're not. So like why even put it in if it's going to be so surface level? And then I listened to The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahi Bloom. This was a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was giving a little bit self-help, but also it was like, this feels like you are a much richer person and not taking into account like people who may be living it much below your typical like wealth status. So not sure how I feel about it. Editing Obi here. I forgot to mention The Holiday Trap, which I did read in the month of December. Like, that just kind of slipped my mind. You guys can see my review of it up in the corner. I thought it was a fun book, and like it was a good holiday book to just kind of get me in the mood while I was also like away from home. And yeah, and a big conversation piece about having found family, which was great. Also, if you're wondering, the majority of the books I read this year were romance, but I also read a decent amount of like political books, biographies, and classics. And also some of the main authors that I was reading were obviously Lana Ferguson, Ali Hazelwood, B.K. Morrison, Robin Waller Kimmer, Jason Stanley, really the main people, and I guess also Rebecca F. Kennedy, who I also like read 2 of her books. So you can see I have tried a lot of different authors, mostly women, but it was a very good year, I'd say. Those were all of the books that I have read. If I do finish reading like one book that I have on my Kindle, or like I've got a couple of books on my Kindle right now, like maybe we'll finish that, but I don't know, and I'm not counting that in my yearly wrap up right now. So yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed my like little synopsis and opinions about these books. This is going to be a crazy one to edit. Please let me know if you want any more book content. I may do a couple of bits and pieces here and there, but I don't want to be just like a booktuber. That's not really what I want. I just do enjoy reading. I find a lot of fun in it. Overall, thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!